What's up, everybody? Mr. T back again to finish our discussion on World War One. Today, we're going to talk about World War One. This is part two of that chapter. You guys remember last time when we left off? The United States had just decided to enter World War One. Germany plotting against Mexico to attack them. So here we are. The United States has entered the war. And the United States actually entered the war at what one could call the perfect time. Russia was having its own issues in its country, and they got out of the war. And so, the Allies needed a new partner to help fight against Germany and Austro-Hungary. 1917, March of 1917, Russia was having some really terrible wartime conditions. Morale was low, their economy was bad, there was lots of strikes and demonstrations in its capital, which at the time was called Petrograd. Now it's called St. Petersburg. And this led to Russia ending their fight on the Eastern Front. The leader of Russia at the time, this man pictured, Tsar Nicholas II, abdicated, or if you guys remember what abdicated is he gave up his throne. His army, who was mostly composed of peasants at the time and were not getting paid, decided to join the side of protesters. And as you can imagine, things did not go well for Tsar Nicholas, and eventually himself and his entire family were executed by the protesters. This led to some periods of unrest where a couple groups tried to take control of the country. But eventually, in October 1917, a revolutionary group called the Bolsheviks, through lots of violence, seized power. They were led by this man pictured here, Vladimir Lenin, and they demanded a government for the workers and the peasants, which lots of people liked at the time since they were the ones who were suffering the worst. And it helped Lenin establish the world's first communist government based on the ideas of Karl Marx's Communist Manifesto, which we talked about a couple chapters ago. Now, communist government was not a great idea for many of the upper class citizens, those who had money. The government that was in place, which was the Tsarist rule, was there for about 300 years. The Romanov family controlled it, and this was a really good thing for people who had money in the upper class citizens there in Russia. But of course, as we've seen through history, what was good for the upper class and the few people who had money was not good for most of the people who didn't have, or the working class people. So this revolution really was kind of like the French Revolution, is where the peasants and the working class people were sick and tired of things and needed a change. With all of this going on in Russia, they realized quickly that they could not fight the war and deal with this revolution. So they signed the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk with Germany. And you can see there the light pink portion of that map. Russia gave up that land to Germany and ended their war with Germany. This was great for Germany because now they could focus all of their energy on the Western Front and fighting the German, or the British and the French and the now United States Army. Woodrow Wilson was president of the United States at that time, and he was the one who decided to enter the United States into the war. He justified why the United States was going to war and informed Congress in a speech to Congress and to the nation that this war was the war to end all wars. And he had come up with a plan to prevent another major conflict from ever happening again. And on January 8th of 1918, he presented his plan known as the 14 Points. So that plan had 14 ideas or 14 things that needed to happen to stop wars from happening again. Some of those things were like no more or no longer could there be secret treaties or alliances that were not known to the world. People had to be able to sail on the seas freely. Uh, Countries should have smaller militaries, an end or an adjustment to colonial claims. That was kind of a big thing. Um, Russian territory, Belgian territory, and French territory, the original territory, need to be restored so that the occupying nations there at the time they would leave, realigning Italian borders so that they get a little bit more land there in their country. Remember, they switched sides, so um, Woodrow Wilson wanted to help out Italy with there. The Austro-Hungarian Empire, they wanted to set up separate countries for them, give them a little more autonomy. Restoring the Balkan Peninsula, the countries of Romania, Serbia, and Montenegro. Okay. And number 14 there was one of the most important things that Woodrow Wilson wanted and really pushed for, which was a League of Nations, which was an organization of a bunch of different countries in the world working together to resolve disputes before they led to war. And this was one of the most important things that Woodrow Wilson wanted to happen. So, with this 14-point plan, America entering the war, it really helped turn the tide. Okay? The amount of American soldiers, the materials that they brought, really helped stop the Germans from advancing in the Second Battle of the Marne and kind of destroy their morale. That and Youth Are Gone offensive, which went from September 1918 to November 1918, was really about the final phase of World War I. And on November 11, 1918, shortly after Austria-Hungary exited the war, the Germans agreed to sign an armistice agreement ending World War I. So the United States wasn't in the war for a very long time, but their fresh infusion of troops and materials and people who hadn't been fighting for a long time really helped give that final push to end the war. So the cost of war was very heavy. And unlike any war before, the amount of devastation that the world saw was unmatched. This war really ravaged Europe, devastating an entire generation of European men. Okay, the best guess that historians can give are that 37 million were killed or wounded in just 4 years of fighting. There were no working farms or factories because many of them were destroyed during the war. So that meant that the European economy was devastated as well. In the middle of the war, towards the end of the war, a flu pandemic called the Spanish flu broke out. And it was a very deadly, extremely contagious strain of influenza that spread around the globe, infecting over 500 million people and killing between 40 and 70 million people, which was more than the war had killed itself. So with the flu pandemic and the war, we had somewhere between 70 and 80 million people dying around the world, which was a really significant portion of the population. You can imagine that with all this going on, the entire world was ready for peace. Okay, you guys can watch this at home. A little bit more on the 1918 pandemic. It's kind of relevant to the time we're going on right now, so check that out. So when the war was over in 1918, Kaiser Wilhelm II of Germany and Emperor Karl of Austria stepped down from their thrones. In 1918, Germany signed Treaty of Versailles, which was a peace treaty, and it forced Germany to accept sole responsibility for the war. So the only ones responsible for the war, they had to give it to their colonies. It had to return the land of Alsace to France. Um, Austria and Ottoman empires were broken up, and new countries were formed from those lands. And you can check out the map there on the right. Austria, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, Poland, Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, Finland. Those were all Yugoslavia. All those countries were built out of those lands that were once Austria-Hungary or the Ottoman empires. On top of all this, Germany was forced to pay heavy reparations, which means they had to give back money to other countries on the other side of the war, so like Great Britain and France and the United States and other countries. And they also had to reduce the size of its army and navy and completely eliminate its force. So this war took a heavy toll on Germany. They lost a lot of land along the Rhine River, and it was occupied by the Allies, and they had to demilitarize. The whole point of this was because they thought Germany was the sole aggressors, and they really were going after France, and so they wanted to make sure that Germany did not have the opportunity to do that again. Now, of course, Germans themselves were humiliated by terms of this treaty, but they really had no choice but to accept. All right, so the Treaty of Versailles also created the international organization that Woodrow Wilson wanted, called the League of Nations. Uh, the whole point of this was to help prevent future wars, promote democracy, and keep peace. So it was set up with a bunch of nations in charge, but because the US Congress disagreed or opposed to this provision, the United States joined. And with the United States emerged from World War I as one of the most powerful countries, the League of Nations turned out to be mostly ineffective, and really didn't do much. World War I left many parts of the world starving, in poverty, with lots of unemployment, that really set the stage for the Second World War, which we will cover next time. So in total, to end World War I, there were 5 separate peace treaties that were signed between the Allied nations in Germany, Austria-Hungary, and the Ottoman Empire. The most important of those was the Treaty of Versailles. Okay, on the left there, it did all the things that we talked about already, like forming the League of Nations, Germany losing territories, new nations being formed by those territories, and Germany accepting blame for war. Some of the other treaties, what they did, it required defeated nations to reduce their military and pay war costs for other countries. Austria-Hungary was divided up. Bulgaria lost some territory and became smaller. Yugoslavia was formed out of that territory. Ottoman Empire was divided up, and the League of Nations took over those Ottoman lands. So here we have photos of persons, uh, soldiers in World War I. Supply provided these to her grandfather, grandfather. Right here, mustache. You can see these soldiers are in their own meals there. Next one, we're hanging out. It's like a helium balloon being filled up there. Right. There's the helium balloon filled in on the left. All right. Soldiers when they were not in playing cards. Some music. So just a little insight to how life was for these soldiers on both of the war. You can see this meal planner. And what are we fighting for at the time? Soldiers were not fed very well. You can see that food choices are here. All right, so that ends the discussion on World War I and its effects. It's going to set us up to talk about World War II. When you're done with this, check out the epic history. It's going to cover 1917. It's also going to cover the year of 1918 and really another World War I. Give you more insight to it, give you a better understanding of what the world was going through during this war.